Hello, Haunted Family, and welcome back to another episode of Paranormal Storytime. This installment features stories that all have something to do with Ouija boards. I know. A lot of people hate them. A lot of people are scared of them. Some people claim to have had bad experiences. We've actually done a video on how to make Ouija boards at home. I've used one quite often. I have one sitting in my kitchen, actually. It's one of those things. It's very polarizing in the field of paranormal. So let's see what our stories have to say about Ouija. My house has always been a place of comfort for me. I always felt safe there. I never thought I'd see the day I was scared of my own room. When I first noticed the hot and cold spots in my room, I didn't think anything of it. The day before that started, I'd bought a Ouija board to try to contact ghosts. The thing did move, and I was convinced it was because one of my believer friends wanted to change my mind about ghosts being a bunch of hooey. At the moment, I was scared. Not of the board, which I heard could wreak havoc on my house, but my mother, if she knew what I was doing. She'd kill me if she knew I'd let my friends bring over a Ouija board. Anyway, the experience went by pretty uneventful until one of my friends asked if there was ghosts in my house. The pointer moved towards yes and stopped there. They continued asking questions until they heard a very loud bang downstairs. Everyone screamed, including me. I grabbed the board, shoved it in a box, and flung it across the room. I knew it was only my mom, but I didn't want to get caught with the board. My friends all told me what dumb move that was. If only I'd listened to them. The day after my little experience, I began to notice the hot and cold spots in my room. It bugged me, because no matter what I did, my room would be too hot in some places and too cold in others. I heard creaks and moans and just assumed it was the neighbors. But when I heard dry, hoarse whispering, calling my name, that was enough. I walked into my brother's room, only to find him fast asleep. Puzzled, I walked back downstairs and into my room. When I returned, I had someone to greet me. A large, swirling black mist was in my room. I rubbed my eyes and looked again and saw nothing. I sighed. My freaky friends were wearing off on me. I looked in my room and found a large black mark that looked like some kind of picture. I glanced more closely and gasped. It was a picture that looked like some kind of demon. Terrified, I backed from the wall and fell on my bed. I knew something went wrong. The next morning, I called my friends and told them what had happened. They agreed to meet me after they said one little phrase. I told you so. We had planned to use the Ouija board one last time. We were all nervous. We began to ask questions. Finally, we got into action. We asked whatever it was to please leave. We told it we never meant for it to come. Another loud crash and a rumble, and it was gone. To this day, I hear things every once in a while, but I'm no longer haunted by the ghost in my room. It happened when I was around 10 or 11. I'd always been interested in the supernatural, and, being just a kid, I thought it was really cool that ghosts were real. So you can imagine my astonishment when it happened. I lived in a rather large house with my mother, father, and my older brother. My bedroom was the last, and at the very end of a long hallway, far away from the rest of the house. I had a pet Jack Russell Terrier named Molly, who always slept in my room. One night, lying in bed, I could not sleep. It was very hot, but for some reason, my bedroom was unbelievably cold. Opening my eyes, I suddenly noticed a strange silhouette hovering beside my bed. I squinted in the darkness, but the harder I tried to make out what the figure was, the less visible it seemed. Shrugging it off, thinking it was just me, slowly I drifted back to sleep. But around 2 a.m., I was awoken by Molly, whimpering softly. Sitting up, I noticed an uncomfortable tension under my right arm. Examining the irritation, I found nothing but a large red rash that seemed to disappear every time I tried to show my parents. I told them the figure in my room, but was informed by my mother that I was probably still sleeping. A few nights later, my room was flushed with coldness again, and once again, I opened my eyes to see the same figure. This time, I could make out the gentle-looking little boy, dressed in tattered rags. His face was pale, and a glowing aura, as I called it, shone around his frail figure. The early hours that morning, Molly woke me up. She was whimpering again, and had gradually made her way up to my chest, where she curled up next to me. I don't understand dogs very well, but I knew she was scared of something. The rash appeared again that morning, and again I tried to show my parents. They didn't believe me, as the redness kept coming and going. Trying to add into my rash story, my sighting was the little boy. I was pushed out of the room. Dad said that if I lied again like that, I'd be in a lot of trouble. My brother was the only one who believed me. He told me that he too had seen the little boy, and that he had somehow communicated with it through the means of a Ouija board. I told my brother that I would like to have the word with the boy, so he tried to use his Ouija board again, but this time with me present. We got in contact with something that seemed to make the upturned tumbler fog up and glide around the board. A strange, cold feeling in the air was all around us. My brother told me it was the little boy who he was talking to through the Ouija board, and that I was allowed to ask some questions if they were not to offend the ghost. From that event, my brother and I found out that the little boy did not want to hurt us, but was only there because he, too, lived in that house. He, the little boy, said that my room was once his room, and that he was about my age. We closed the Ouija board down, and I went to bed as it was late. I did not sleep a wink that night, knowing that the little boy could be there, staring at me. Somehow I drifted off to sleep, and when I woke in the morning I found something pressed under my arm. It was a folded up piece of paper. I opened it up, and there was nothing on it. No message, nothing. Just a folded piece of paper. From then on, the boy continued to leave messages under my arm. It grew from small pieces of paper to pencils. One morning I found a marble under there. My brother and I are older now, and I've not forgotten that little boy. But I do not live in that house anymore. I've met up with many, many psychics and psychic investigators who helped me get in contact with the little boy with a Ouija board. I haven't seen the small boy since I moved out of the house, but I have not forgotten him. I know that he never meant to harm me. My parents still don't believe my brother or I, but we know the truth. I was young, and I feel what my parents like to call make-believe. Well, there's nothing really made up. This ghost was a little boy. I would say he was around 9, and he would tell me to do things that I was not allowed to do. But he was my friend, and that lasted a while, till my mother taught me that in God's name, you could take things out of your life. So I tried that out, and it worked. I walked past houses in different neighborhoods and saw what happened years ago. For instance, I was walking with my best friend and saw a man getting stabbed in the head. My friend freaked out, and she told me that 5 years ago there was a robbery at that house, and 2 males with black ski masks stabbed a Chinese man in the yard. That's exactly what I'd saw. So that went on for a while, and then I started to dream. Like I dreamed I was giving birth, and 3 weeks later I had a miscarriage. Note, I did not know that I was pregnant. And then I got in with some friends who had a board, calling spirits. And I did learn and see some things, all different spirits. Females, males, old, young, sneaky ones. I have found not to trust all of them. The board, I feel, is dangerous. I have seen things. I've seen the cursor fly across the room, windows shutter slam. That was how the spirits in my life, I believe. I also had a friend down the street. This was the most exciting experience yet. Now this house, it's really haunted. Lots of action would go on there when we all got together. Again, playing with the board. The 4 of us felt that together, with all that energy, could cause a lot of action. We were all sitting on the bed calling. Not even a minute we had something pulling, spelling out the name Michael. And it started typing that he watched people take showers. Out of sight things. I thought someone was moving it. Being all freaked out, I threw my hands off the board. And so everyone else jerked theirs away also. But that pointer, it was still moving across the board. And it started going crazy in circles and flew across the room. We all jumped up and we were trying to get out that door. The door would not open. The room got very cold, chilly cold. Finally, after like 2 minutes, the door opened. And then we were tripping over each other to get out. We ran into the living room and talked about what we had felt. The girl who lived in the house, her shoes were in the room. So I went in with her to get them, because nobody else would go back into that room. And the room was totally different. The coldness was gone. That was the last time I played with the board. I've always thought that someone was moving it, but we had always felt that something was in that house. You could stand there and you could feel something walk right through you. The family that lived there ended up moving out, selling it. They only had a few things left, big pieces of furniture. One night I heard glass breaking, loud. I went out and saw smoke in the road. I called 911, and as I was talking, I saw people running. So I thought, all I know is all the neighbors got questioned about that. I was the only one to see the people running, and someone had called the police before me. That house was checked out for a year. Nobody knows how the fire started. The owners were located, and the next day I went in with a friend, and the only thing not burned in that room was the Ouija board and the Bible directly across the room from it. Tell me that isn't wild. One summer when I was around 11 or 12, my parents, my little sister, and my 2 older sisters moved into an old gray house in northern Indiana. It had cement sidewalks that went all the way around to the back of the house. And at the back, by the door, there was a date, 2 footprints and a handprint. The date was about 1810, if I remember correctly. It's been at least 10 years since this happened. Anyway, right before we moved in, my 2 older sisters wanted to stay the night in the house. So they did. After a while being there, they started to feel uneasy. They sat back to back on the floor, wishing they hadn't done this. All of a sudden, they heard a loud banging coming from the basement. They called the police from the neighbor's house, and after the police checked everything and found nothing, they left. Once again, my sisters, still scared out of their minds, sat on the floor. They heard it again, so once again they called the police. They showed up and stuck around a while, thinking that maybe they could hear what the girls were hearing. About 15 minutes or so later, they heard it. One of the police officers told them that it was just an old furnace in the basement making noises. My sisters had a good laugh and finally drifted off to sleep. When we finally moved in and settled down, I wanted to check out the place. In my room there was walk-in closets, about 12 feet in length. And on the left, right inside the door, was a smaller door that we assumed led to the attic. I felt very odd every time I had to go into my closet. One night, my little sister decided that she was going to sleep in my bedroom. Of course, being the brave sister I was, I picked up my little book of ghost stories and began to read her a story called Phone Calls from a Ghost. All of a sudden, the light in the hallway began to flicker. It was the light we were using to read the book by. We got scared, and I threw the book out of my bedroom door. We lay there talking, wondering what caused that to happen, when we began to hear music and lots of voices coming from the attic. I could hear a child running around and laughing, but my sister says she didn't hear that. We decided to go downstairs and sleep in her room that night. A few weeks go by, and one of my older sisters brought a Ouija board home. My mom didn't like the idea of it being in her house, because her mother had always told her that they were of the devil. But being a little curious herself, we all sat down and watched as my mother, older sister, began to play the game. The spirit in the board said that her name was Gule. I'm not sure how it would be pronounced, but I remember how it was spelled. We asked it some silly questions, and then my mom asked more serious questions about if one of us was going to die, when, and how. The board told her something, but she wouldn't tell us what it was. And then she got really mad at the spirit and began calling it names. The little device that you put your hands on began moving around the board really fast in a figure 8 pattern. No one was touching it. And then it flew off the board and sailed across the room right into the dining room. My mom told my sister to get it out of her house and never mention anything that had happened. But she didn't take it out. She just put it in the closet in my room. One night, me, my little sister, decided that we were going to be gypsies. So we got our crystal ball, which was nothing more than an electric candle with a light bulb, and we sat in the playroom and turned all the lights off. My mom was the only one home, and she was downstairs. We sat next to the candle and began chanting, "Oh, spirits, if you are here, give us a sign," and "We want to know who you really are and why you are here." Over and over we chanted. Just then, it felt really cold. The windows were closed, and it was midsummer. The bulb in the candle flashed and then went out, and I heard someone whisper, "I'm here." It sounded like a child's voice. and then the hall light flashed twice, and then stayed on for about 5 to 10 seconds and went out. My sister and I ran down the stairs, across the dining room, and into the front room where our mother was sitting reading a book. We asked her if she had flashed the lights just now, and she said, no. See, my mom can't walk very well. She can't run or walk fast either. So she wouldn't have been able to get to the stairwell, flash the lights, and then get back to her seat in time before we had made it down the stairs. She didn't even notice the lights flash. Needless to say, we didn't go back upstairs. The next weekend, I stayed with my friend Robin. I didn't say anything about what was going on at our house. My mom and my little sister were home alone. During the night, my sister woke up because she had heard a woman scream. She ran into my mom's room and woke her up and told her. Mom called the police. They showed up and checked everything out, and nothing. After Mom got her calmed down and they both fell asleep, my sister heard them screaming again. So, once again, Mom called the police, and they still didn't find anything. I wanted to find out why all this stuff was happening, so I began to ask around. A few of the people in the neighborhood got together and helped me out. Of course, they thought my sister and I were crazy, and then my friend Erin talked to the lady at the library. She told Erin what happened, and then Erin came to my house to tell me. We were standing outside the house, on the sidewalk, where my room is below the window, in my walk-in closet, and she told me that there was a mom, a dad, and a child who had lived there long ago. One evening, after school, the little boy was up in his room, which was the same room I had at the time. Mom was standing in the hall, talking to him, when the dad came home. He was drunk, and told her to come downstairs. She looked at the little boy and told him not to come down. But he could hear his mom and dad yelling, and then all of a sudden he heard his mom scream, and she just kept screaming. He ran down the stairs and into the kitchen, and there was blood everywhere. And his dad was still stabbing her in the chest and stomach. He turned to the boy and said, "You're next," and he ran up the stairs and locked himself in the attic. The dad took the mother's body and went down to the basement. In the basement, there's a little cubby hole in the wall. Inside the hole was another hole, and he put her body in the second cubby hole, and then he went after the boy. He kicked the attic door open, and when he found the boy, he began stabbing him, a little at a time, just enough to make him bleed. The neighbors heard the boy's screams and called the police. The dad took the boy, still screaming, and went down to the basement, climbed into the second cubby hole, and finished killing the boy. And then he took his own life. After Erin finished telling me the story, I looked up at my window, and it was like I was looking at a family photo. I could see the mom, the dad, and the boy, all looking down at me. She was wearing a whitish sweater, and the dad was wearing overalls and a plaid shirt. The boy was also wearing overalls and a plain shirt. They looked happy. They looked at Erin, who didn't seem to notice them, and I looked back, and they were all gone. After everyone went home, I could sit and tell my mom about it. She didn't believe me anyway. I began putting things together. The child's voice in the attic, the woman screaming and banging in the basement. I know it couldn't have been the furnace. It was the middle of summer, and there wasn't a need for a furnace to be on. I still have little visits from the family, but nothing as bad or as horrible as what they went through when they were alive. I grew up in a small town in central New Hampshire. When I was 18, friends took me to a grave which was located on the side of the road. The grave was about 10 feet off the road, and the grave was that of a boy named Miles Tyler, who had died in 1811. My friend then told me about some of the experiences that he had had or heard from this site. I was a little skeptical of the stories. He said that sometimes you will hear leaves and branches moving when there's no wind. Also, the branches will crack and break as if someone's walking on them. He also mentioned that if you left food out, it would end up unwrapped and partially or completely consumed. Even unopened cans of soda. The next day, I was over to a friend's house and told him the story. And he had also admitted to hearing these stories and that they were true. So he planned to take a trip up there with a group of friends. One of these people was a girl who was really into ghosts and spirits at the time. She was really into the Ouija board and having seances. We arrived there around 11 at night, so this way we wouldn't have to deal with traffic or intrusions by passerbys. The girl and her friends started to try to communicate with the spirit, who was buried at the grave, while the rest of us just watched intensely. There was one person there who was mocking the whole thing, and definitely was a complete non-believer, and they had no respect for the dead whatsoever. They had made contact with the little boy within 2 or 3 minutes of trying. The spirit they were talking to was getting very aggravated at the person who was mocking him. I, at the time, didn't know what to believe. I just kept watching, my eyes glued on the ever-moving oracle. Soon we all heard the leaves and limbs rustling in the woods around us. We all started to get nervous, while the person who was mocking this whole thing even picked up his own pace. This just made things go completely out of control. Now we could definitely hear the branches breaking, and it was starting to rain. Suddenly, the guy who had been mocking this whole event was staring at the headstone in complete fear. That's when we all noticed it. It had moved. It had tilted at least 2 to 3 inches to the left. We all decided to leave. Me and 2 of my friends jumped in my truck to leave. My truck wouldn't start. I tried for what seemed like forever, still scared out of my mind. I jumped out of the truck and told my friend to get in the driver's seat. I got out and started pushing the truck up the road. Within 50 feet, the truck started and the rain stopped. So did the wind. We left and never looked back. I haven't been back to that place since. We all stayed up to daylight, and I dropped them off and went home. We were all shaken up by this. We didn't even talk about it afterwards. That morning, I told my mom what happened. Funny thing was, she did not tell me that she didn't believe me, but chose to say, "I hope you learned your lesson and don't go back." I'm sorry for the lack of names, but I didn't want to involve anyone without their permission. I now live out of state and have lost track of most of them. We've still never talked about what happened.